You're fired, effective immediately. Richard Hartwell exploded through my office door at 7 in the morning, his face red with anger contrasting with his impeccable Italian suit. Last night at the Children's Hospital charity dinner, you had the audacity to blatantly flirt with my wife. I was organizing client files when our CEO's husband stormed into my space like a hurricane of privilege and misplaced jealousy. His icy blue eyes pierced me as if I were the worst kind of predator. When Diana approached your desk, you stood up, flashed that seductive smile, and even dared to greet her in Mandarin. He pointed an accusing finger at me. Do you think I'm an idiot? I know exactly what you were doing. My name is Jake Morrison, and at 32 years old, I just discovered that 3 years of total dedication to this company meant absolutely nothing when measured against the wounded ego of a rich, paranoid man. What Richard didn't know was that I actually spoke Mandarin fluently. 2 years studying in Shanghai during college, plus my major in international business, had given me not only complete fluency but a deep understanding of the cultural nuances that most Westerners would never master. My wife was visibly uncomfortable with your approach, Richard continued, his voice thick with venom. Diana told me everything when we got home. How you took advantage of the social setting to try to impress her with your language skills. I felt something break in my chest as I realized that my entire career was about to come crashing down because of a ridiculous misunderstanding. 3 years of building the international division of this company from 2 clients to 47. 3 years of working weekends, missing family dinners, pouring my soul into this place. All destroyed because I politely greeted the CEO in Mandarin during a social event. She called me in tears, Richard lied blatantly, his fists clenched. She said you made her feel like an object, that it was completely inappropriate. Diana will be here in an hour and you'll be cleaning your desk before lunch. The irony of the situation was almost funny. If he knew the truth about why I spoke Mandarin so fluently, about the real reason Diana had been so surprised last night. But Richard Hartwell was too busy constructing his narrative of the protective husband to notice the details that really mattered. 8 months ago, I was browsing freelance tutoring websites looking for extra income to pay off my student loans. That's when I found that ad on Elite Academic Services, an exclusive platform for wealthy clients. Someone needed intensive Mandarin lessons twice a week at his residence. The pay was extraordinary, $300 per session. No name was listed, just an address in the most expensive part of town and very specific requirements: complete discretion, professional appearance, and absolute confidentiality. I applied using my maiden name, Jake Peterson, instead of my married name that appeared on all my work documents. I changed my hairstyle, wore glasses I didn't normally need, and dressed more conservatively than usual. If you're enjoying this story of betrayal and family manipulation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what comes next will show you how a lie can destroy much more than just a career. As Richard continued his furious tirade about my alleged inappropriate behavior, I kept a neutral expression. He didn't realize that every word that came out of his mouth only confirmed something I had suspected for weeks. Something that would make this whole ridiculous accusation seem like child's play compared to what I was about to reveal. What Richard Hartwell couldn't see through his arrogant blindness was that Diana hadn't been uncomfortable with me at the event. She had been shocked. Shocked because she recognized my voice. 10 months ago, when I responded to that ad at Elite Academic Services, the luxury penthouse where I was hired to teach was located in Beacon Hill, Boston's most exclusive neighborhood. The private elevator opened directly into the penthouse, revealing floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. "You must be Jake," said a female voice behind me. When I turned, an elegant woman in her 40s greeted me with a firm handshake. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair, clothes that cost more than my monthly salary, and green eyes that analyzed me as if I were a product she was considering buying. "I'm Diana," she said simply. "I need to learn Mandarin for business. 6 months to become fluent enough to impress Chinese investors. Can you do it?" I didn't know I was talking to Diana Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Enterprises. To me, she was just another wealthy client who drastically overestimated the speed of language learning. 6 months is an aggressive schedule, I explained politely. Mandarin is one of the most challenging languages for native English speakers. The tonal system alone requires. "I don't care about the difficulties," she interrupted, that natural arrogance of someone who has always gotten everything she wanted shining in her eyes. "I have a crucial presentation in March for investors from Beijing. This opportunity is worth $50 million, and I'm not going to lose it because I can't communicate properly. During the first few weeks, Diana proved to be a frustrating student. She wanted immediate results without investing the necessary time in practice. She constantly interrupted lessons to take urgent business calls, clearly demonstrating that she saw me as a necessary inconvenience, not a professional. "Jake, bring me a coffee next time," she ordered casually after our third session. "And use the service entrance. I don't want my neighbors seeing teachers coming in through the main lobby." I needed that $600 a week to pay off my student loans, so I swallowed my pride and accepted her humiliating conditions. But each session revealed more about Diana Hartwell's true character. She lived in a fantasy world where she was this sophisticated international executive, constantly bragging about her natural ability for languages, and how she was impressing people at social events with phrases in Mandarin. "My husband thinks I'm a genius," she boasted during a particularly difficult session. "He doesn't understand how anyone can master languages so quickly. Richard always says I have an exceptional talent for international business." The irony was painful. Diana could barely distinguish between basic Mandarin tones. After 2 months of intensive lessons, she still needed me to write everything phonetically because she couldn't read Chinese characters. Her grammar was elementary, her pronunciation embarrassing, and her cultural understanding non-existent. Meanwhile, at my day job at Morrison & Associates, I was responsible for the company's entire Asian division. I spoke with Chinese clients daily, negotiated complex contracts in Mandarin, and had personally closed deals worth millions. I lived in the world of international business that Diana only pretended to inhabit. But what irritated me most wasn't her incompetence. It was her attitude. "You should consider working for a real company instead of just teaching," she commented condescendingly after a December session. "With your skills, you could probably get a decent job somewhere." If she only knew that I probably made more in my decent job than she paid in annual taxes on that penthouse. The situation worsened when Diana began pushing for impossible results. She wanted to impress Chinese investors without understanding basic concepts of cultural etiquette. She demanded phonetic scripts for complex presentations, expecting me to memorize words without understanding their meanings. "This deal will establish me as a real force in the corporate world," she declared during our most tense session in January. "Richard always sees me as the decorative wife. But when I close this deal, he'll realize I'm much more than that." It was at that moment that I felt a pang of sympathy for her. Beneath all that arrogance was a woman desperate to prove her worth, to be taken seriously in a world that saw her as nothing more than a pretty accessory. But my compassion evaporated quickly as she stepped up her casual cruelty. "Jake, you need to dress better when you come here," she criticized one afternoon. "Your clothes are fine for a teacher, but my neighbors might think I'm hiring help, inadequate help." Inadequate was obviously her code word for poor or inferior. Each comment revealed more about how she categorized people: useful or disposable, important or invisible. The turning point came 3 weeks before the charity event. Diana was practicing her presentation for investors, and it was a complete disaster. She couldn't remember basic business terms, constantly confused yes and no, and was essentially speaking random words with unwavering confidence. "This isn't working," I said gently. "You need more practice with fundamental concepts before attempting complex presentations." His face turned red with anger. "Are you saying I'm stupid?" Absolutely not. Mandarin is incredibly difficult. Most people need years to achieve business fluency. "I don't have years," she exploded. "This presentation is everything to me. It's my chance to prove that I belong in the business world, not just as someone's trophy wife." In that moment, I saw real vulnerability flash through her mask of arrogance. For a brief instant, Diana wasn't the cold, calculating executive, but a woman terrified of being seen as inadequate. "We'll do extra sessions," I promised. "I'll create phonetic scripts for your entire presentation. You can memorize it word for word." The relief on her face was obvious. For the first time in months, she said thank you to me as if she really meant it. Over the next 3 weeks, I practically rewrote her entire presentation in phonetic Mandarin. We practiced for hours until she could recite everything perfectly, even though she still didn't understand what she was saying. I created backup materials, alternative phrases for different scenarios, and even coached her on proper greeting techniques and cultural customs. During this intensive period, Diana began to treat me slightly better. Not as an equal, but at least as a valuable employee rather than disposable help. She offered me drinks, asked about my background, and occasionally even said please and thank you. "You're quite good at this," she admitted one evening. "Where did you learn to speak so fluently?" I told her about my studies in Shanghai, my business degree, my work in international markets. I was careful not to mention company names or specific details that could connect me to my day job. "Impressive," she said, though her tone suggested she still saw me as hired help who happened to have an education. "You should consider working for a real company instead of just teaching." If only she knew. 2 weeks before the investor presentation, Diana was finally hitting her stride. She could deliver the entire speech smoothly, answer basic questions, even handle small talk about the weather and travel. "I'm going to be magnificent," she declared after our final practice session. "Those investors won't know what hit them. This deal is going to change everything." I smiled and put away my materials. "You've worked incredibly hard. I'm sure it will go well." That's when she made the comment that would haunt me later. "You know, I'm attending a charity gala this weekend. It's for the Children's Hospital, and all the important business people in town will be there. I'll finally be able to show off my language skills to everyone." My heart sank. The company I worked for was a major sponsor of that very gala. I would be there representing our international division, sitting at the corporate table. There was a good chance I would see Diana, even though she still had no idea who I really was. What I couldn't imagine was how that chance encounter would destroy everything I had built, while exposing a truth that would make Diana's fragile ego and her husband's paranoia seem like child's play compared to what was about to be revealed. I considered canceling my attendance at the gala or at least warning Diana somehow, but I couldn't figure out how to do that without revealing my identity. Besides, what were the chances we would actually interact? It was a huge event with hundreds of attendees. The gala was stunning. Our company had bought an entire table near the front, and I was seated with our senior management team and their spouses. I chose an elegant tuxedo, combed my hair differently, and wore contact lenses instead of my usual glasses. I looked completely different from the conservative tutor Diana knew. Halfway through dinner, I spotted her across the room. She was radiant in a stunning silver dress, dominating the conversation at what was obviously the most prestigious table in the venue. She was animated, gesturing expressively as she talked to the people around her. Even from a distance, I could tell she was having the time of her life. That's when I saw him, the man sitting next to her, nodding and smiling as she spoke. My blood froze as recognition hit me like a runaway train. Diana was Diana Hartwell, wife of our CEO. The woman I had been teaching for 8 months was married to my boss. I spent the rest of the evening in a trance, barely touching my food, praying she wouldn't notice me. When dessert was served, I excused myself to use the restroom, hoping to avoid any chance encounters. But fate had other plans. As I was returning to my table, Diana was walking directly toward me. She was heading to greet someone at a nearby table, and our paths would cross in seconds. I quickly sat down and focused intently on my plate, hoping she would pass by without noticing me. That's when everything went wrong. "Jake," a voice called. Jake Morrison. One of my colleagues was trying to get my attention from across the room. I automatically looked up, responding to my name, just as Diana was passing by. Our eyes met for exactly 2 seconds. I saw confusion flash across her face, as if she almost recognized me but couldn't quite place me. Then the moment passed, and she continued on her way. I thought I was safe. I thought those 2 seconds of near recognition wouldn't matter. I was completely wrong. The next morning, Richard stormed into my office with murder in his eyes, and I finally understood what had happened. Diana had spent the entire night trying to figure out where she knew me from. When she couldn't place my face, she became convinced that I had deliberately ignored her by not standing up when she walked past my desk. In her mind, some low-level employee had disrespected the CEO's wife at a charity gala, and that simply could not be tolerated. "Pack your bags," my boss said after Diana finished her tirade and stormed out. His face was grim, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Jake. I really am. But I can't have that kind of drama in my home." I looked at him in disbelief. "You're firing me because I didn't get up fast enough when your wife walked by?" "She says you deliberately ignored her. That you made her look foolish in front of important people." "That's insane. I was eating dinner and didn't even notice she was there. He sighed heavily. It doesn't matter. She's made her decision, and arguing with her will only make things worse for both of us. I'll give you excellent references and a generous severance package. I felt my whole world crumbling. 3 years of perfect performance reviews, countless successful deals, relationships with clients who trusted me completely. All meaning nothing because Diana Hartwell's pride had been hurt. That's when inspiration struck. Before I go, I said calmly, there's something you should know about your wife's big presentation to the Chinese investors. I walked over to my computer and opened my email account. With a few quick clicks, I sent a message with video attachments of all the tutoring sessions I had recorded for my own reference. Check your email, I said quietly. Her face paled as she opened the first video. There was Diana stumbling through basic Mandarin phrases, asking me to repeat everything phonetically, admitting she couldn't understand what she was saying. She's been lying to you, I continued. For 8 months, I've been her private tutor. She can't speak Mandarin beyond memorized scripts. Everything she's told you about her language skills is completely false. I took off my glasses and let down my hair, transforming back into the person Diana knew as her tutor. I'm Jake Peterson, I said, and effective immediately, your wife's Mandarin lessons are cancelled. The silence in that office was deafening. My boss stood petrified, staring at the computer screen where his wife clearly struggled with pronunciations that any first-year student would easily master. The video showed her repeatedly asking me to write everything in English because she couldn't read Chinese characters. This presentation is in 3 days, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I know. I helped her prepare every word. She memorized it like a script, but she doesn't understand what she's saying. If someone asks an unscripted question in Mandarin, or if she deviates from the prepared comments even slightly, the whole thing will fall apart. He looked at me with something between horror and disbelief. Why didn't you tell me who you were during class? Client confidentiality. She hired me through a tutoring service under strict privacy agreements. I had no idea she was your wife until last night at the gala. Even so, I planned to keep her secret because that's what professionals do. I gathered the last of my personal items from my desk. But since she's decided to destroy my career over an imaginary offense, I guess those confidentiality agreements are null and void. I walked toward the door, then stopped. Those Chinese investors aren't just bringing money to this business. They're bringing their top executives, their translators, and their cultural liaison. People who will immediately recognize whether his wife can actually communicate or is just reciting memorized phrases. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and I walked out of that building for what I thought was the last time. But I was wrong about that, too. As I walked to my car, a realization began to form. Diana hadn't just destroyed my career out of a misperception of disrespect. She had built her entire professional identity on an elaborate lie, and now that lie was about to explode in her face in the most spectacular way possible. The next 3 days would reveal not only her incompetence in Mandarin, but also her willingness to deceive everyone around her, including her own husband, to maintain a facade of international sophistication. And me? Well, I had a decision to make. I could just move on and let nature take its course, or I could ensure that her fall was as complete and publicly humiliating as my dismissal had been. What Diana didn't realize was that by firing me so unfairly, she hadn't just lost a valuable employee. She had made an enemy of someone who knew exactly where all her most shameful secrets were buried. The next 3 days passed in a blur of angry phone calls and increasingly desperate voicemails from Diana. Apparently, my boss had confronted her about the tutoring sessions, and she was absolutely furious that I had betrayed her trust. You signed confidentiality agreements, she yelled during one particularly nasty voicemail. I'm going to sue you for everything you have. I called back once, mostly out of curiosity. Actually, Diana, you should read those agreements more carefully. They protect the privacy of clients from outside third parties, but they don't prevent tutors from defending themselves when clients try to damage their careers through false accusations. I never made false accusations. You deliberately disrespected me at that gala. No, Diana. You told me that your husband fired me because I deliberately ignored you, but you and I both know that you didn't recognize me there. You're destroying my reputation based on a completely fictional narrative that you've created in your head. The line was silent for a long moment. Then, you're still fired. Yes, I am. And your presentation is tomorrow. Good luck. I hung up and tried to put the whole mess behind me. I had bigger problems to worry about, like finding a new job and explaining to potential employers why I had left my previous position so suddenly. But I couldn't stop thinking about those Chinese investors. Some of them were people I had worked with professionally over the past 3 years. Mr. Chun from Beijing Manufacturing, who always started meetings with personal questions about family. Ms. Lu Hong from Shanghai Logistics, who appreciated cultural references and traditional greetings. They were coming to this presentation expecting to meet someone who understood their language and business customs. Instead, they were about to meet Diana Hartwell with her memorized script and her complete ignorance of everything beyond basic pronunciation. The morning of the presentation, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. I kept wondering how it would unfold, how quickly the investors would realize they were being misled, how badly it would reflect on everyone involved. Around 10 o'clock, my phone rang. It was James Morrison, my former boss, and he sounded desperate. "Jake, I need your help. I don't work there anymore. Remember?" The investors arrived early. They wanted to have lunch before the presentation. And Diana is panicking. She can't handle small talk in Mandarin. She locked herself in the bathroom and won't come out. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. That's unfortunate, but it's not my problem anymore. I'll give you your job back. Full reinstatement, promotion, raise, whatever you want. Please, just help us get through this presentation. I considered it for exactly 3 seconds. No. Jake, please. This deal is worth $50 million to the company. If it falls apart, we'll have to lay off half the international division. That hit me harder than I expected. The international division wasn't just my job. It was built with the help of incredible colleagues who didn't deserve to lose their jobs because of this mess. "I'll make a deal," I finally said. "I'll come in as a consultant just this once. I'll help with translation during the presentation, but I'm not doing this to save Diana's reputation. I'm doing this to protect the people who still work there." "Thank you. Thank you so much." "And James? After today, I never want to see or speak to his wife again." I arrived at the office 45 minutes before the presentation was scheduled to begin. The main conference room had been transformed into an impressive setup with multimedia displays, translated materials, and elegant catering that showed respect for Chinese business culture. Diana was standing near the windows, practicing her opening remarks quietly. She looked beautiful and professional, but I could see the terror in her eyes. "What is she doing here?" Diana hissed at her husband when she saw me coming in. "Helping save your presentation," I replied calmly. "Unless you'd rather handle the Q&A session alone." His face paled. We both knew she couldn't handle unscripted questions. "Fine, but you stay in the background. This is my presentation, my business, my moment." Understood. The investors arrived right on time, which I had expected. Mr. Chen Wei greeted me in Mandarin, and I responded appropriately, introducing myself as a consultant supporting the presentation. Ms. Lu Hong asked about my background in Chinese markets, and we had a brief and pleasant conversation about business relationships. I could see Diana watching our exchange with growing anxiety. The investors were clearly comfortable with me, but when she tried to join the conversation with her stiff, rehearsed phrases, their polite smiles became tense. "Perhaps we should begin the formal presentation," suggested Mr. Chun in English, clearly sensing the awkwardness. Diana took her position at the front of the room and launched into her prepared remarks. I had to admit, months of practice had paid off. Her pronunciation was decent, and she delivered the memorized content with confidence. The investors listened politely, taking notes and occasionally nodding. Everything was going according to plan. Then Ms. Lu Hong raised her hand. "Excuse me," she said in Mandarin. "Could you clarify the logistics timeline for the Shanghai distribution center?" Diana's face went blank. The question wasn't part of her script. "I'm sorry," she said in English. "Could you repeat that?" Ms. Lu Hong repeated the question, this time speaking more slowly and clearly. Diana looked at me desperately. I could have helped her. I could have translated the question and guided her through a response. Instead, I remained silent. If you're enjoying this story about how lies can explode in your face in spectacular fashion, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next shows how years of pretending can unravel in a matter of minutes. I think, Diana stammered, trying to respond in broken Mandarin that made no grammatical sense. Mr. Chen frowned and exchanged glances with his colleagues. They were beginning to understand that something was very wrong. Perhaps, Mr. Chen said diplomatically, we could continue the discussion in English? But the damage was already done. The investors had come here expecting to work with someone who could communicate effectively in their language. They had been promised a partner who understood Chinese business culture and could facilitate smooth international cooperation. Instead, they discovered that their primary contact had basically lied about her qualifications. Ms. Lu Hong asked another question, this time in English, about regulatory compliance in Shanghai. It was a basic question that anyone involved in Chinese business should be able to answer easily. Diana clearly had no idea what to say. Perhaps my consultant could address that, she said weakly. I stepped in and answered the question thoroughly, explaining the regulatory structure, recent changes in compliance requirements, and best practices for foreign companies operating in Shanghai. The investors nodded appreciatively and began directing their follow-up questions to me instead of Diana. For the next 20 minutes, I essentially took over the presentation. I answered detailed questions about logistics, cultural considerations, legal requirements, and market analysis. The investors were engaged and interested, clearly impressed with the depth of knowledge I was providing. Diana stood to the side, completely marginalized in her own presentation. Finally, Mr. Chen addressed the elephant in the room. I'm confused about the structure of this partnership, he said carefully. We were told that Ms. Hartwell would be our primary liaison, but it seems clear that Miss. He looked at me questioningly. Peterson, I supplied. Miss Peterson has the expertise we need for this collaboration. Could you clarify who would actually be managing this relationship? The room fell silent. Diana's husband looked like he wanted to disappear. Diana was staring at the floor, her face bright red with humiliation. I think, I said gently, there may have been some miscommunication about roles and responsibilities. Perhaps it would be best to reschedule this discussion after the organizational structure can be clarified. Mr. Chen nodded gravely. I think that would be wise. The investors gathered their materials and prepared to leave. Ms. Lu Hong approached me privately. We were very impressed with your knowledge and professionalism, she said quietly. If you were representing this company in future negotiations, we would be very interested in moving forward. However, we cannot work with someone who misrepresented his qualifications so significantly. After the investors left, the conference room was as quiet as a tomb. Diana was sitting in a chair, staring at her hands. Her husband was pacing near the windows. And I was gathering my notes, preparing to leave for good. $50 million, James said quietly. Gone. It was never really there, I replied. You can't build international partnerships on lies and pretense. These investors are too smart and too experienced to be fooled for long. Diana finally looked up. This is all your fault. I turned to face her directly. No, Diana. This is a consequence of your choices. You chose to lie about your qualifications. You chose to destroy my career over a perceived offense that existed only in your imagination. You chose to prioritize your ego over the success of this business. I worked so hard on this presentation. You memorized words you didn't understand for a job you weren't qualified for. That's not work. That's performance art. I walked toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I actually felt sorry for you during those tutoring sessions. You seemed so desperate to prove yourself, to be taken seriously. But respect isn't something you can fake or demand. It's something you earn through competence, integrity, and treating other people with basic human dignity. You're still fired, she said weakly. I laughed. Diana, after today, I wouldn't work for this company again if you begged me. But I was wrong about that, too. 2 weeks later, James Morrison called me with an interesting proposal. And this time, things would be very, very different. The board of directors wasn't exactly thrilled when they heard about the failed presentation and the circumstances surrounding your dismissal, James said on the phone, his voice heavy with a tension I'd never heard before. It was 2 weeks after the disaster with the Chinese investors, and I was at home reviewing job offers when my former boss called. Apparently, Several board members have worked with me professionally over the years and were furious that I was fired for such trivial reasons. That was interesting. Very interesting. We would like to offer you the position of Vice President of International Business Development, he continued. It comes with a substantial raise, your own budget, and complete autonomy over the international division. What about Diana? I asked bluntly. She is no longer involved in business operations. The board made that very clear. I considered the offer carefully. It was tempting, very tempting. But I had conditions. I accept, but with a few demands. First, I want a written guarantee that family members of executives cannot interfere in personnel decisions. Second, I want the authority to rebuild the international division my way, without interference from anyone. Done. And third, I want a formal apology from the company for my unfair dismissal included in my personnel file. Absolutely. 6 months later, I had completely rebuilt the relationship with the Chinese investors and successfully closed the deal that Diana had destroyed. The Shanghai partnership was worth $68 million, more than the original proposal, and led to additional opportunities throughout Asia. Diana, meanwhile, had become something of a pariah in her social circle. Word spread quickly about her failed presentation and fabricated language skills. The same people who had once been impressed by her Mandarin phrases now whispered about her dishonesty and poor judgment. I heard through office gossip that she had tried to blame me for sabotaging her presentation, but many people witnessed what really happened. The investors themselves made it clear that the problem wasn't sabotage, it was incompetence masquerading as expertise. The final piece of poetic justice came 8 months after that disastrous presentation. James Morrison approached me with a delicate request. The board is considering some changes to the executive structure, he said carefully. They're impressed with your work rebuilding the international division and are wondering if you'd be interested in taking on additional responsibilities. What kind of responsibilities? They're thinking of creating a new position, Senior Vice President of Global Operations. It would involve overseeing all international business, including partnerships, acquisitions, and strategic planning. I smiled. Sounds like the kind of role that would require reporting directly to the board of directors. It would. And presumably involve significant decision-making authority over the direction of the company's international strategy? That's correct. I accept. 3 months later, I was officially promoted to Senior Vice President of Global Operations, becoming one of the most senior executives in the company. My office was 2 floors above James Morrison's, and my authority extended to every international agreement the company entered into. Diana never spoke to me again after that presentation, which was exactly what I expected. But I heard that she had started taking Spanish lessons with a different tutoring service, probably planning some new scheme to establish herself as an international business expert. I hoped her new tutor would be more patient than I had been. The irony of the whole situation did not escape me. Diana had tried to destroy my career because she felt I had not shown her proper respect. But her vindictive behavior had ultimately led to the exposure of her lies, the failure of her business ambitions, and my promotion to a position with more authority than she had ever dreamed of having. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor about these things. Looking back, I realized that those 8 months of mentoring sessions taught me something valuable about people like Diana. They are so focused on appearing important that they forget to actually become competent. They confuse performance with substance, arrogance with confidence, and entitlement with leadership. But the business world has a way of exposing pretense eventually. You can only fake expertise for so long before reality catches up with you. And when it does, you better hope the people you stepped on aren't in a position to step back. But our story doesn't end here. What happened next would prove that some people never learn from their mistakes, and that true satisfaction sometimes comes not just from seeing the consequences, but from watching someone face the reality of their own choices in a way that transforms everything. 2 years have passed since the devastating day when James Morrison called me with an offer that would change everything forever. "Jake, we need to talk," he said, his voice heavy with an urgency I had never heard before. "The board has discovered some disturbing things about Diana and Richard." Apparently, my exposure of Diana's incompetence had been just the tip of the iceberg. An internal audit revealed that she had been embezzling company funds to finance her lavish lifestyle, including her private lessons and elaborate social events. Richard, for his part, had been complicit by using his position as CEO to approve fictitious consulting fees that benefited only his personal connections. The couple had been running the company as their personal piggy bank for over 3 years. They were fired yesterday, James continued. Richard was forced to resign, and Diana is facing criminal charges for embezzlement. The irony was delicious. Diana, who had tried to destroy me out of a misguided sense of disrespect, now faced the real public humiliation of being exposed as a common criminal. There's more, James said. The board voted unanimously to offer you the position of interim CEO. They want you to start immediately. 6 months later, I wasn't just interim CEO, I was the permanent CEO of a completely transformed company. I implemented strict transparency policies, rebuilt our international division from the ground up, and established partnerships with Chinese companies that generated over $100 million in revenue. Diana, meanwhile, had become a complete pariah. Her sentence included full restitution of the stolen funds, community service, and 5 years probation. Her reputation in Boston society was ruined. The same people who once admired her supposed sophistication now whispered about her dishonesty and arrogance. Richard lost not only the company, but also his license to act as an executive in any registered corporation. The last I heard, he was working as a freelance consultant, trying to rebuild a career he had destroyed through his own greed and paranoia. The most satisfying moment came when I received a call from Ms. Lu Hong, the Chinese investor who had witnessed Diana's humiliation. "Mr. Peterson," she said, "we are very impressed with the changes at your company. We would like to propose a strategic partnership that could be worth over $200 million over the next 5 years." I closed that deal 3 months later, proving that genuine competence always triumphs over pretense and manipulation. The real revenge wasn't seeing Diana and Richard fall, it was building something better than they could ever have imagined. I turned a corrupt company into a model of integrity and international success. Today, when I look out the window of my office on the top floor, the same office Richard once occupied, I feel no anger or resentment. I feel gratitude. Gratitude because Diana's injustice forced me to discover capabilities I didn't know I had. Her attempt to destroy me ultimately revealed my true strength and determination. I learned that people like Diana and Richard are ultimately prisoners of their own limitations. They can only see the world through lenses of privilege and manipulation, unable to comprehend that true success comes from competence, integrity, and hard work. When someone tries to destroy you out of jealousy or a wounded ego, remember, they are giving you the greatest opportunity of your life. The opportunity to prove what you are truly capable of. 6 months ago, I received a letter from Diana in prison. She apologized and said she finally understood how cruel and unfair she had been. I replied with a single sentence, "I hope you find the peace you've been looking for." Because, in the end, the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, it's becoming so successful that they become irrelevant. If this story of transformation and triumph over injustice has touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. We have dozens of stories like this, where ordinary people find extraordinary strength to overcome adversity and achieve justice. Today, as I sign international contracts and lead a team of talented professionals, I sometimes wonder where I would be if Diana had never tried to destroy me. I'd probably still be just another competent employee at a mediocre company. Instead, I'm the CEO of one of the fastest-growing companies in the country, with offices in 12 countries and a reputation for integrity that Diana and Richard could never have built. Sometimes the people who try to bring you down end up being your greatest teachers. They teach you what you're truly capable of.